Smooth 98.1. Love music, love life. This is Freshly Pressed. We're looking at the news stories making the headlines across the country. And as always, we'd love for you to be a part of the conversation. The WhatsApp number is 0809 4440981. And you could also tweet at Smooth981. And we've got the analyst joining us this morning. It's Chibuzor, who doesn't have a mic in front of him. Okay, now he does.
Okay.
Good morning, Chibuzor, and welcome.
Good morning, Zibby. Well, welcome, Lagos. Good morning, Lagos. I knew something was off, but I wasn't sure what it was.
I know we have those moments sometimes.
Yeah.
All right. Again, you can send your thoughts across via WhatsApp 0809 4440981. You can also tweet at Smooth981. We're streaming live on our YouTube channel as well, so you can catch the live stream and post a comment underneath the live stream. It's Smooth981 on our YouTube. We're starting off with a daily trust. A bank's borrowing drops by 23.99 trillion naira in March.
So, basically, what we have here is that there's, based on the CBN's figures, borrowing by banks have dropped in Q1 of 2024 in comparison with Q1 of 2023. Borrowing, and so the banks Nigerian banks lending, and when I say borrowing, outward borrowings, lending in the months, or well, basically lending in the months of March to private and public sectors dropped by 23.99 trillion, based on CBN data. Borrowings to the private sector reduced to 71.2 trillion in March compared to 80.86 in February, making it 9.65 trillion. On the other hand, on the public sector, there was a reduction of about 14.34 trillion or 42%, which is quite a jump from 33.9% I borrowed in February. So what we're looking at is a month-by-month comparison of out lendings by these banks, financial institutions to both the public and private sectors. And what we're seeing is a considerable reduction. So when I look through the story, the next phrase on the story actually, I'm not sure if it should be there or it's just because they talk about the reduction is coming as on the heels of improved growth in the economy and credit. Well, so basically, what analysts have actually attributed this low borrowing to several factors. They say some might be early signs of recession, which we hope it's not. That if this dip continues, because obviously, the assumption is that as the banks, public and private sectors are lending less, there's less economic activity, and that would point to recession if it continues for specific months. And it's like also other analysts are attributing it to the banks not willing to give out loans, or the lenders actually finding it a bit challenging to actually run businesses on borrowing. So I think it's a mix of both. Obviously, we've seen the increases in interest rates. So obviously, for any lender or anybody who is taking money from financial institutions, you do have to have a clear plan on how to how to pay back those funds, which means that you should be willing, consumers for your products or services will be willing to absorb that cost because you're going to pass on that cost. And we're seeing a lot more of that. I think the major challenge for me is that you're seeing an economy where there's a lot of cost being passed on to the consumers at the moment. And the question is that how much more can the consumers take, given that the fact that the consumers' wallets have not increased in size? So basically, consumers are sharing their wallets, sharing their costs, and basically moving this cost around. There's some push by the government to push for increased credit. I'm neither here nor there because I'm not sure that's a bit clear how those credit facilities will be set out to the population or the citizens. And but given the fact that you've seen things like reduced lending, I'm actually quite interested in seeing how those new credit facilities would work. At the end of the day, banks obviously exist for the purpose of making profit, and while the interest rates should give them greater profit, there are also obviously there's also the flip side about credit management. So I think yes, we should one or two things could actually stimulate increased lending, especially by private sector, would be if obviously there are new wages and salaries and people can absorb a lot more cost. But we do need to see some economic movement, as in growth in the economy in itself. So not just on the surface, but actual impact to actually expanding people's wallets. So that's my feel on the story.
All right, thank you for that, Chibuzor. We're still on banking matters. Businesses to pay 0.5% cybersecurity levy. And this headline comes from The Nation.
Okay. I saw this story this morning. I think it was one of the most I actually jumped at when I saw this story lined up this morning. It was quite interesting for me. Um, I do need to understand what the businesses are actually going to be paying for. So when we talk about the cyber, we just have a look at the story. So this was a directive from the central bank to activate the payment of 0.5% on some electronic transactions. Those that got this circular yesterday are the mobile money operators, payment service providers, PSBs, and the implementation guidance is based on the Cybercrime Prohibition Prevention Act of 2024. Well, I think that's just been enacted. The levy is supposed to be remitted for the National Cybersecurity Fund for the administration of ONSA. And ONSA is the Office of the National Security Advisor. Now, my challenge with this levy is not the fact that is one of my challenges with a lot of levies that we have in the country, and I think it's also is that when these entities and the earlier story was about lending by both private and public institutions. When you look at this, is an additional levy on what these institutions are already paying. So, and if you look at this, if this is going to be on particular types of transactions, what would typically happen with these institutions? That they're going to push it on to the users of those services. Now, my challenge with some of these things is that we need to pick from a structural point of view, a strategic point of view, we need to pick what our battles are. If you look at both institutions that this will be targeted in terms of transactions, they're targeted to the electronic transactions. And we actually have been pushing for a cashless society. We're trying to push for less cash in the system, more electronic transactions, and encourage Nigerians to use electronic transactions on one side. If the eventual cost of doing electronic transaction overrides, it's far higher than that of doing a cash-based transaction, what would happen at the end of the day is that people would always default to cash. Now, there's the flip side of it is that when you fund the office of the ONSA, and they do the work they need to do, it also improves, the entire environment. It builds trust in the services and the systems, and people can patronize it a lot more. That is another argument I would go on the other side. I really am a bit going by the precedents of the governments and the past track records. I'm not sure too many Nigerians have built up that level of trust for the government in terms of this kind of services. It looks like another rent-seeking device for the government to be able to fund another office. And if I juxtapose this with the entire thing about the Rasai report and trying to find ways to streamline activities, I ask myself, this office should have is existing for some reason. Are we looking for funding for it? Do we need to streamline some of these services and make them stronger and make them make them more efficient than add this additional cost? But hey, there's a lot that's been passed now, and this entities now need to find a way to manage this additional cost on their business practices and keep doing business.
All right, thank you, Chibuzor, for that. WhatsApp 0809 440 981. And don't forget, we're streaming live on our YouTube. It's Smooth 981. Next headline comes from Vanguard. Nigeria cuts electricity supplies to Benin Republic, Togo, and Niger to boost domestic supply.
Okay, so this is one of those interesting stories. When the average Nigerian sees this headline, average Nigerians would ask, why are we supplying electricity to other countries when we don't have electricity here? But it's what it is. It's basically what it is. The Nigerian federal government, shockingly and surprisingly to a lot of Nigerians, have been providing, have been selling electricity or power to Niger Republic, Togo, Niger Republic and Togo. And what has happened is they are trying to basically cap their power supply to those three neighboring customers, those three countries to 6%. And basically this transmission, the directive outlined in document titled the Interim Order on Transmission System Dispatch Operations, Cross-Border Supply and Related Matters, which is a mouthful, will only last for 6 months subject to change. Power delivery to Nigeria's neighbors based on this directive should not exceed 6% of the total electricity grid at a given time. So basically what we're saying is that if we have this much electricity in the national grid, we shouldn't supply more than 6% of it to these three countries. So in kind of the instances where we have zero or where our national grid has collapsed, obviously they also feel the bite down there. So it's in practice, this is not a bad idea. This is actually one of the ways that you actually fund your electricity system or your sector by actually getting people who are ready to pay those prices either within the country or outside the country, like what they would say, the inverted pyramid, to pay for those services. And that money you can now take and put back into the system. What we would actually like as a country is that if we were able to even increase, so this is at transmission level, so you're actually pushing, this is what you're pushing out at the national grid. If we're able to ensure that level of efficiency downwards into our own system, and there's more consumption, we shouldn't, I don't think Nigerians should be, despite all the jokes, despite all the headlines, I don't think Nigerians should seriously be concerned that much with what goes out. And I think what NEC has done in this instance is to basically put a control into the system that, we need to first guarantee that we're able to supply power internally. And what we have left subject to this limit for this 6 months, at least for this preliminary 6 months, can go outside. I think it also gives them some shoulder room or some wiggle room to sort out whatever issues they have internally.
All right, still listening to Smooth 98.1. Let's go on, take a quick break, and the conversation will continue shortly. Stay with us.
Jeez. Somebody has sent the schedules are for exemptions. Yeah, there's a long schedule. Unfortunately, I can't read them out.
Oh yeah, the exemptions.
Yes, there's the
interbank,
educational, salaries, loans, blah blah blah. Oh, because most of these are actually bulk transactions. At the end of the day, a lot of people would not do. So if you look at things like salaries and loans, banks are going to basically dispatch that to the users. It's not the other way around.
Right.
And when banks transfer them, it just makes sense to exempt them from that. Or if otherwise, it will increase the cost of those loans, increase the cost of those salaries. In fact, it means that the company paying your salaries, for instance, and doing a transaction would have to incur additional costs in paying out your salaries.
Right.
Some of this stuff actually makes sense to exempt them. But some of these are not the problem for your problem in your typical Nigerian transferring.
Right. It's freshly pressed on Smooth 98.1. We have the analyst in. It's Chibuzor this morning, and we're looking at the headlines across the country. Let us know your thoughts. 0809 444 0981. That is the WhatsApp number. You can tweet or exit Smooth 981. And we're streaming live on YouTube as well. Let's see. Adegboyega says cybersecurity levy on financial transactions done by Nigerians is what I call overprecedent in local parlance in Lagos State. This administration wants to grind more from Nigerians, and the economy is hard enough. Nigerians, this is getting too much. Let's see. Ernest, okay. Danokuda says the cybercrime tax is one too many. The citizens should be allowed to breathe from all this unnecessary taxation.
So I just wanted to chip in before Zibby means me to the other story. I think NS was there is actually a schedule for exemptions of this type of transactions, and so Nigerians should actually maybe look out for that schedule and be maybe conversant with it. I think the issue is not about the funding of the office or the need to get funds to fund the office of ONSA to prevent security or cybersecurity issues. There is actually a pressing need to tighten up our cybersecurity controls. The question is who has that primary responsibility? What will ONSA be doing with the funding in clear terms? And if you look at this for me, and I'll give you my perspective to this, and if you look at the long list of levies that most of these entities will be paying at the end of the day, how do they align with the entire business cost? And like I said, they would move this cost to the users. How does this additional fee, when users want to make those transactions, either stop them from doing electronic transfers in line with what we're trying to do in line with the cashless society? So we need to balance up some of these things when we try and go in this strategy, in this directions. Those are my thoughts.
Joseph Many, do you have a calendar? Why are you saying Happy New Year? We are in May. Okay. The message says, this is fraud. Why is the government so keen to impoverish Nigerians with all sorts of subtle charges? We have stamp duties and all renewal, and now cybersecurity levy. This is not anything new, actually. It's just been implemented. This is something that has been around for about 10 years. 2015? Okay.
Yeah, stamp, all those things.
Yeah. It's to fund the flamboyant lifestyle of those in government. Ajayi says it's an irony that even as Nigerians continue to wallow in darkness due to the miserable 3,000 megawatts of electricity that is generated with the attendant frequent national grid collapse, Benin, Togo, and Niger are still getting electricity supply from the country.
They only get if we get. Basically, that's what it is.
All right, let's move on to the next headline. This one's coming from The Nation. No room for foreign military base, federal government affirms.
Okay, so I think sometime last week there was a lot of stories. I think it was late last week or even earlier than that. There are a lot of stories that are popping out about the possibility of Nigeria, of foreign military, of some foreign military bases being set up in Nigeria by, I think, largely by the United States, if I'm not wrong. And the government has come out to basically say it's not happening. It came out in the press largely, and this was largely for by the fact that in previous times, prior to the changes in governments in some of our neighboring countries, like I think Niger specifically, there was some foreign military bases based there. And after the new government took over, one of the things they tried to get rid of is the presence of those foreign bases. And when I use foreign bases, they're largely operated by, I think, the United States and France. And when we look at the larger geopolitical issues around most of the countries where you had some changes in powers that surround Nigeria have actually have stronger relationships with Russia in this case. So a lot of them have actually shut down those bases or asked those bases to be shut down. So the question has been, where do these bases get moved to, since there is, in the eyes of looking at from the point of the Americans and where that there's a need for there's a strategic need for those bases to exist. So obviously the next thing is Nigeria. There's been some talk that, given Nigeria's current situation and position about, we're looking for investment, looking for funding, that we probably are open to it. But what the minister is saying, that, they're urging the general public to disregard the falsehood that Nigeria is not in any discussion with any foreign country. We've neither received nor are we considering proposals from any country on the establishment of foreign military bases in Nigeria. He also talked about the fact that we enjoy some cooperation in tackling our security challenges, and our president being committed to deepening relationships and, in line with this renewed hope agenda. I think I would, from my own perspective, I think it's actually smart for Nigeria to still remain neutral, because this is still a developing story as far as I'm concerned. With the move of some of the Sahel countries back to military government, either in the short or medium or long time, we are not sure yet of. Sorry, We're not sure how long they'll remain in this government. There's obviously been a move from their previous connections to France and more to, obviously in this instance, Russia. Nigeria doesn't. I do not think Nigeria wants to be caught up in the middle of these geopolitical wars at here. I think we need to be more inward looking and try and sort out our own problems with whichever strategic partner meets our needs. So I do hope that the government continues in this stride and tries to keep some level of neutrality. Um, you know, that's my perspective on this. So yeah, we'll take the government's word for it and we'll move on with that.
All right. Ade says the cybersecurity charge is already in place and taken from the interbank transfer charges, except there is a change. It only ate into what the banks were earning from these charges for these mode of transfers. From Vanguard, police shoot protesting women in Ughelli North, 5 hospitalized. How did we get here?
How did we get here? Nigeria. Okay, so what basically the story is that from the 5 women from Oteri community in Ughelli are currently in the central hospital at Ughelli as police attacked the Ughelli area command, allegedly opened fire on protesting women in Ughelli North local government. And they said the protesters were armed with leaves, accused the command of illegal arrest, molestation, and intimidation. There was an eyewitness report who, well, one of the victims, sorry, who was speaking, or alleged victim, Susan, from a hospital bed, said she was on the way to the market to buy material. She saw family people in front of the police station and she alighted to inquire what was happening there. Immediately, she heard sounds of police gunshots and tear gas, and she saw people running and also ran back. She then felt something in her leg, and it made it hard for her to run. Uh, um, that was when all the bystanders noticed that she had been shot in her right leg, and she was then taken to the hospital. So they complained about the number of police roadblocks within their community. They talked about illegal arrests within the community, and basically police trying to make some money by charging for bail, something which our constitution keeps reminding us is illegal, that there are no charges for bail, but the police somehow continues to do. And they went to go and protest the palace and complain to the royal father about the activity of police, but getting there in front of the police station, they were now shot at. So for me, it raises a lot of questions. And I think last week we were here, was it last week or the week before, or some weeks before? When we were here, I'm just going to jump a bit to the issue about the traditional rulers and the roles that they should play. The women allegedly were heading to the palace of the traditional ruler to make this complaint. And those are the kind of roles that we expect traditional rulers to play, to be that representative of their communities and be the mouthpiece of their communities, where these kind of issues that affect the communities do happen. We don't see enough of that, especially in big cities and towns and places like Lagos. I rarely seen that happen in areas, and it's largely due to the fact that most of these traditional rulers, a lot of them owe their existence and their daily living to the same governments or the same powers that be. So it's almost like asking them to put their mouths in their feet in their mouth and stopping food from entering. So it's a bit of a challenge, and that's one of the things that calls to question the role that traditional rulers play. But going back to the stories and going back to one of the issues that we've raised over time is a lot of things have come out in this story that are not different from what the average Nigerian experiences everywhere. So this started with, the police are supposed to be in the community. So where we talk a lot about the police being closer to the community, we talk a lot about communal policing and all that. And my view about communal policing is not so much about people that belong to the community being in the police guys in the community. So it's not about area or state of origin or locality. It's about the police being closer to the people within that community and forming relationship. Your whatever policeman can be from Ireland, as far as I care, but he needs to have a relationship with the people within this community and needs to know that he serves them and not some distant power somewhere. That is where the problem lies for me in a lot of instances. So when you have a lot more of that, you have a lot less of this. Police also need to be reoriented, and we've spoken a lot about not just the police, both the uniformed and non-uniformed service need to understand that they do serve the populace and not serve themselves. The fact that they have a gun and they have a uniform, while it gives them some power, should make them also remember that that power ultimately comes from the people that they serve. We seem to forget that a lot in Nigeria. And, I think one of the spokesmen of the police last week was giving us lectures about how we should recognize that once a man has a gun, that we shouldn't have an argument with him or whatever. Logically, it makes sense, and he's speaking common sense. But the root of those discussions that these guys or these people in the forces need to understand what their role is, and Nigerian citizens also need to understand what our roles are to make this work. I do hope we are waiting to see what turn this and how the IG of police will deal with this, or the police authorities will deal with this. And I do encourage those that have been affected to also look for legal recourse in the court of law, and let's see how this plays out also. We need to keep testing and testing our systems to improve our systems. If we don't, then tomorrow we'll come back to the same point.
No, just to ask a quick question from this story. These women were unarmed, or as the Vanguard reporter wrote, they were armed with leaves. Is there anything that would suggest that people who are holding leaves to protest would be a threat to the police or to public peace in any way, shape, or form?
So the definition of threats to public peace, especially by our police forces and especially by our security forces, is a bit broad. I do not think. I think the only places where Nigerian police officers tend to manage public protests well is when they're outside Nigeria. And then they tend to obviously give a lot of respect to, people allowed to protest. Whenever Nigerian police or Nigerian military officials go and serve abroad in either peacekeeping mission or a foreign exchange mission, they come back with a lot of plaudits, they come back with a lot of badges, they come back with a lot of praise about how good and great they are. And it's almost typical of the way typical Nigerians act when we travel outside. We tend to follow the law when we go outside. When we come back to Nigeria, we tend to switch back to jungle mode where, I have the gun, I have the tear gas, who are you to come and protest? Now, the police might come out tomorrow and say, you know what, these women are actually lying, we saw one or two of them with cutlasses, or we saw men with cutlasses in the background, so we need to disperse them before they cause damage to the community. Maybe that's we're still waiting for the side of the police in this story, but ordinarily, women with leaves and whatever shouldn't have caused any level of tension or any level of threats to the police. Even the use of tear gas, for anybody who has experienced tear gas, was in this kind of situation might not have been necessary. And I'm saying might not have been necessary because obviously I'm not a security official, and I'll wait for one of them to advise me better. But those are what it is. We need to learn how the security and armed security forces in Nigeria need to learn how to live with the civilian population, and vice versa. We need to go back to the books. When they go through the police colleges, are they actually teaching? Is that a core part of what is being taught, and is it being taken seriously? Because if it is, then we'll see a difference in the way these guys approach. And it's not just the police, it's the army, the navy, the air force. When they step out of those barracks, when they set out those trainings and those courses and those programs, we should see some level of difference. At the moment, we do not.
All right, let's see. Fabian from Ekbe says it's unfortunate that banks are quick to increase taxes on funds deposited and on bank transactions, yet slow regarding improvements on their services. In addition, why are welcome fees charged even when the transaction fails? Frequently, there's no money in ATMs, yet POS operators have readily available.
So I just want to quickly, Fabian, the banks have regulators in CBN. There's FCCPC. I think Nigerians should use a lot of these instruments a lot more on institutions, not just the banks. There's a lot of it on the telcos. I think we should see a lot more on the banks, even on the power distribution companies. Let's use the systems and work them.
Taya says this cybersecurity levy is regressive because the security architecture is bedeviled with so many issues, and this source of finance isn't it. Nigeria has no business being a hosting ground for foreign governments because they've been ousted by previous landlords, and all the benefits of such an arrangement will be highlighted, but its demerits clearly tucked in. Ibukun says, how can women be armed with leaves? Even the reporting is prejudiced. Since when did leaves become weapons? Police brutality in Nigeria is commonplace. Angel says, Zibby asking, how did we get here? That's what NSAS was all about. We've always been here. Sadly, it has not improved. Well, that is all the time that we have for Freshly Pressed this morning. Thanks for your messages. Thanks for listening. And of course, special thanks to Chibuzor for being our analyst this morning.
Thank you very much, Lagos. Thank you very much, Zibby.
Do stay with us. There is a lot more to come on the Smooth Breakfast.